All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, welcome. Thank you so much for attending our webinar, Creating Thematic Units Using Jamboard. So I'm going to actually skip this one. We did 2 slides on this. My name is Jamie Trujillo. I am the program director of the Albuquerque Adult Learning Center. I'm also the president of the New Mexico Adult Education Association. And here with me is my co-presenter, Nadia Kader. She is the instructional designer and coordinator for the Albuquerque Adult Learning Center, and we will be co-presenting today. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about, we are going to be first starting with a connection activity. We're going to get a little bit of information from you about how you currently plan your lesson units if you do lesson units. Then we'll give you a really quick review of Jamboard. What is Jamboard? We'll talk about what is a thematic unit. What do we mean when we talk about that? And then finally, we'll get into creating thematic units in Jamboard. So we're going to start with our learning objective. This is what we're hoping that you will get at the end of this presentation. So hopefully you'll be able to apply your knowledge of thematic units to create a thematic unit plan using Google Jamboard. So first off, how do you currently plan lesson units for your curriculum if you do that? So please feel free to unmute if you would rather do that, or you can put your answer in the chat. I have my chat box up, and just let us know, how do you currently plan your lesson units? What do you use?
To be honest, I don't, because I use the old kind. Actually, I don't teach adult education classes. I lead my people to do that. But before I got into adult educations, I was in higher ed with traditions. So I did the old planning, the old pencil paper written down and everything else. And I like Jamboard. I think we have a brief discussions about this last time. And what Emily showed us how to do it, I really do like that a lot. And I like to take this back so that way I have more information how it works. So I can implement that or show my instructors the modern way of doing lesson plans rather than paper and pencil like I have been doing.
So I have a question. Do you know what your teachers are doing right now with their lesson planning? Do they each have their own different ways of lesson planning, or is this something that you're still trying to figure out? I know you're still relatively new in your position, so.
I asked them, they don't share it with me. They just say we have a lesson plan. That's all you need to know. It's like, okay, fine. I was like,
Oh my.
oh, you have a lesson plan and however you want to teach your class, I'm fine with that. And we will have a conversation. So you don't have a lesson plan and we don't have anything to teach. That's a different conversation, but you have a lesson plan. I'm cool with that. For now.
Yeah, for now, right? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Did anybody else want to share how you lesson plan?
Um, I can, what I use, I don't have anything technical, but I just plan out what each student needs based on an assessment that they get. So some of them could be like an all class thing or more individualized, depending on where each student is at. So I type it all out, and I give each one what I call a learning plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so I cover all the subjects, but I usually put reading and social studies together so that they read and we go through strategies. So I just set it up like that each day. Um, and then I, I select the textbooks. I use different textbooks, so I select those. And for different strategies, I'll put down page numbers in this book, page numbers in this other book. So I've just put it all together depending on the strategies that we're using. And so then they just move at their own pace, going through each of the resources. And so from time to time, then I pull it together when I know they all need maybe something on vocabulary, context clues. So we all go over how to do how to do that, context clues, look for the hints and all, and then I let them go at their own pace again. So it just that's how I do it. And then I also use Essential Ed and put them on the computer to do some of the practice tests and things like that. So that's what I use.
Thank you. And you know what I'm hearing, part of what I'm hearing is, first off, your lessons are based on assessment. So they're based on student needs from that assessment. You also work with all of the subjects, which is going to be very helpful when we talk about thematic units. We're going to talk about how to incorporate all of the different subjects in doing that. So thank you so much, Nancy, for that. And I noticed, Dr. Tran, you raised your hand.
Yes, ma'am. I have one quick question. Is the Jamboard, is that free or do we have to pay for that?
That is a great question. It is free.
Good.
It is part of the free Google Suite. So that's part of why we are bringing these resources into our webinars, is because there's no additional cost to that. You know,
Because we
so,
like
yes.
we like it when it's free without using the word budget.
Exactly. Exactly. Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other comments before we move on to Jamboard itself? Okay, so let's move on to what is Jamboard. And just so you all know, I did do a webinar called Jam with Jamboard that is on our YouTube channel. And before we get off the call, when Nadia goes into her piece, I'll put the link for our YouTube channel in the chat. That way, if you're still kind of new to Jamboard and you want a little bit more information, more detailed information on Jamboard and how to use it, you can watch that recording. But just to give you a really quick review of Jamboard. Jamboard is an interactive whiteboard system that is developed by Google as part of Google Workplace or Workspace. So, you know, that's why it's free. It's part of all of the free offerings of Google. And it is just like a whiteboard that is on your computer. So it is a space for you to post things. And believe it or not, you can actually buy a real whiteboard that integrates with Google Jamboard. They're not cheap. These are smart boards, but you can actually purchase a Google Jamboard, like a physical Jamboard to use with it that goes onto the computer as you're writing on it, things like that. It'll show up on the computer. You do not need to use that though. You can work with Jamboard just solely in the Google Workspace online. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how to use that to create your thematic unit lesson plan. So I'm going to hand over the microphone to Nadia so she can talk to you more about what is a thematic unit.
Yes, so a thematic unit is the organization of a curriculum around a central theme, right? So it is choosing a theme that is broad enough where different subjects can fit along with it, right? So it'll be a series of lessons that integrate these subjects. So of course, the examples are math, science, language arts, social studies. Nancy, you talked a little bit about reading and social studies going together. That's a part of this. So you're on the right track, right? And each activity should have a main focus towards the thematic idea. And we're going to get into that in a moment. And a thematic unit is much broader than just choosing a topic, because it has to be integrated and thinking about what the theme means, how it relates, in addition to within the subjects. Next slide, please, Jamie. So this is it's a little lot of stuff to unpack, but it's okay, right? So choosing a theme, selecting the appropriate NRS levels. Thanks, Jamie. Yes, we'll have this recording on the YouTube channel, so you will have access to it. Identifying specific objectives you'd like to master. So in addition to the theme, you really have to think about what you want your students to get out of this outside of exposure to the theme. What materials you're going to need for your lessons, the activities. Well, I guess, activities should come first before materials, of course. But what activities are you doing? Because it's not, it has to be varied for interest. Create a variety of discussion questions for your students to continuously think of the theme as you go through lessons. What literature, books, textbooks, worksheets are you using to help you connect the theme to the activities? What are they reading? What are they watching? Right? What are they listening to, perhaps? We use the term literature, but it could be other things. It could be listening to a podcast. It could be reading a selection. It could be reading a diary or watching a video. And of course, tying it back to an assessment. How are you evaluating that the objective was met? How do you know that your students have learned from the material, have learned from the lessons, and took this with them outside of completing handing you their homework or handing you a completed worksheet, right? So these are things that we do have to think about as educators. Next slide, please, Jamie. Great. So why Jamboard? Jamie, actually, that's you.
Yeah, I thought that was mine. So, just as Nadia was explaining with thematic units, there are many different things that you can use, many different platforms you can use to plan your thematic unit. So why did we choose Jamboard? Well, Jamboard is visual. It's actually very pleasing to see. You can put images into Jamboard. You can put Post-it notes. You can put text bubbles. You can color coordinate things. It makes it very visually pleasing. It's also very interactive. So as a team, you and other instructors or even students to a certain degree can share and simultaneously edit the lesson plan. So this is something that you can do as a group. You don't have to do it together. And like I already mentioned, it is shareable. So you can share it in a variety of different ways. You can share it as view only, comment only, or edit mode so that other people can have access to it at certain levels. So we just felt that Jamboard was a really effective way to nicely and very visually pleasing, in a very visually pleasing way, do this lesson plan, this thematic unit. So I'm going to give it back over to Nadia to share an example that she created on Jamboard for a thematic unit.
Okay, so my goal for this was just to really brainstorm and plan on how I could deliver lessons, because I was teaching at the time, and the issue that we were having with the program I was working with was it was really difficult or time consuming to figure out how we can hit as many subjects as we can. And we were all teachers who at the time were covering all subjects. So I know that there's different models and different programs, but at that time I was teaching math and reading, writing, and language, social studies. Another, in addition of that, was digital literacy was ramping up, and this was before COVID, but it was still becoming obvious that our students needed to work in a digital literacy environment, right? They need this moving out of our program. So this is a plan. So I'm going to tell you that I didn't actually finish. I got to most of these, but I didn't finish. We hit summer, then COVID happened, and everything kind of went out the window. But the point is that I had a starting point, and I worked through it, and I did use these activities in different ways. But this is really the most complete that I've had so far. So one issue I did notice with my students is that they really struggled with reading fiction. Reading nonfiction was okay. They actually usually did better on, but reading fiction was something that was really challenging. So I wanted them to really work on a fictional text and be able to analyze and take out this information. We also had to split up my time between math and language arts, and of course having some writing in there, having some science. So what I did was kind of use this is a screenshot, a picture of the Jamboard. But what I did was I put the theme in the middle, which was the Great Depression. So I knew that we had to hit some reading that was fictional, but it also had to hit non-fictional too, right? So this was a plan I had for like a whole unit. So that it would be, I taught once a week. So that was challenging too. So, so this was going to be a couple of weeks of work. So this plan here, we have the subjects written out. And of course, I kind of spun off on a few things. And just what activities, what lessons can we have that will still tie to the theme of the Great Depression, to kind of so students can understand not only the fictional text, but also the context, the time period, the effect of that, right, of the Great Depression. So I have two different kind of math activities here. So one was just like we read charts, right, comparing graphs and looking at that. That's data analysis. We had an activity about tracking miles. So that is like, you know, if you're unfamiliar with the story, it's about a family that's traveling across country to try to get to California because at the time they could not feed themselves. So there was this idea running around that California was where people were going and you'd be able to find jobs and farm and be alive. What's great about the Great Depression in the sense of teaching is that there's so many ways you can go forward with this with multiple activities. The writing assignment was from a pro-con website that had pros and cons, but it still ties in with the theme because the minimum wage was created around after the Great Depression, that there's a realization that there needs to be a minimum wage that people can have to get paid, that they can still survive and have a family, right? So that is tied to the theme. Another sort of writing assignment that's more compare or contrast is comparing, and that could use the math activity, right, of looking at graphs and charts of unemployment. So the students would have to read this chart, these graphs, analyze it, and then write about the information that they got from it. And then, of course, finally, science, it could be different things, but what I chose was like the impact of the Dust Bowl. So again, that's still tying to the reading. It's still tying to the math and the writing, right? And answering questions and just really digesting the text. So that all ties to the same theme. I tacked on a digital literacy because I was trying to get off. One thing I really didn't finish was creating a timeline. And students would read some excerpts and we'd put it as a class. We'd create this like a very basic timeline in Jamboard following kind of the events in the time. And in addition, we also read excerpts of nonfiction. So comparing the fiction with the nonfiction, right? And seeing it as like what has happened and got to where we're trying to work towards where we're going today. Where are we now? And that was my hope. So that's basically breaking down what this is and what this means. So Dr. Tran dropped in the chats, willing to adapt to new tech. So Dr. Tran, you mean with students or staff or both?
Both. Let's just say if we have a group of staff or instructors who did the planning all way just like I did, pencil and papers. And how would you implement this or bring this to be beneficial, especially technologies and not everybody with technology savvy, and the level of degree of using technologies can be different, just like with adult or students in our staff. So how would you deal with it when they resist the new process or the new idea to make the lesson plans a lot easier, a lot friendlier, but it will be less time consuming? How would you address that? How would you deal with the resistance? Because in most cases, people who refuse or resist because they fear of the unknown. In this case, the unknown is the new technology process. So, sorry, new technology process.
No, that's a great question. That is an issue. So one way that I would do it is making it an activity that everyone does together instead of assigning your teachers to do it before working as a group. Is find a way to create space and an activity where everyone works together and you could see how it works. Because it's one thing to just tell people about it. Because of course that's going to come to mind. It's like, well, I'm not great with technology. I don't know why I have to do this. But perhaps it's something that your staff meets in person or an online thing. Maybe we all come together. We work on a plan, right? And working on the plan together, using this technology, showing them how to do it, and helping each other in the process. That's one way I would do it. Jamie, you have a suggestion?
I think you covered it really well. And, no matter what, I think that there will be both students and staff who are resistant no matter what. And I think that doing those things together is going to be just key to it. When you have, whether it's the trainer or teacher or another student that is showing enthusiasm about it and a willingness to try it, a willingness to do it, and then they are very happy with it, it's kind of contagious. So, just working together as a group and making sure that there's that support and that positivity around it, I think is going to be crucial for both staff and students. So I think that you answered it very well, Nadia.
Can you show us where can we find this on the Google Suite? And can you just kind of like show us how to do? Can staff and director use this to plan as well, or is it just only for instructors?
Oh, well, Jamboard can be for anybody.
Yes, yeah. I think that's what we're going to get to next then. What we want to do is we're going to actually share a Jamboard with everybody so that we can try it out and you can see how it's done. So we did want to have this as an example, because this is actually a really thorough example of a thematic unit on the Great Depression. But we were thinking we could try it out and try out a new one. So Nadia, unless there was anything else you wanted to mention, I can move forward to the next slide.
I actually did want to mention that a lot of my idea planning and brainstorming is actually on paper still. What I benefit from using technology is getting more into detail. So getting that ideation or, idea building stage on paper and then putting it online so that it could be shared with people. Because when we create in our notebooks, that is an important process, but it's limiting in that it's hard to share that. So a benefit to using this kind of technology is that the creators can share it. People can add notes or add comments. So say, for example, if you're after the fact, your team did this activity, they worked on it, maybe they're comfortable with it, maybe they're not. They're working on creating their own thematic unit or their own plan or anything. They could share it with you and ask you, Dr. Tran, what do you think? They don't have to go to your office every time and show you a notebook. You could add your own boxes or post-it note or comment. What does this mean? Why don't you elaborate? Or this is great. Keep up the good work. So it's a great collaboration tool too.
I
And
agree
it,
100%.
also because it's always online, it's always there. You guys can always access it. It's not going to be a notebook you have to go digging out of the closet for in a couple months if you think about it, right? So sorry. Yes, let's continue.
Yeah. And just one more addition, you know, you don't have to, everybody doesn't have to be doing it at the same time. That's their beauty of sharing it, is that this is something that can be done asynchronously, where people are kind of putting their input on their own. So yeah, let's take a look at this. So this is a blank plan, okay? And we've created a Jamboard, like I said, so give me just a second to copy this link, and I'm going to paste it here in the chat for you all. So you can go right into the Jamboard, and I'm going to bring up, this is actually a Google slide right now, so I'm going to go into the Jamboard. So hopefully we'll start seeing some other people joining in. I see Nadia's in there.
Jamie, do we want to? Okay.
I
was going to say, do we want to show how to access it from the drive?
Oh, that's a good point. Okay. So there's a couple of ways that you can access Jamboard. Now, we shared a link. So the way to access this particular Jamboard is through the link. And then you can always have this in your drive. Now, there's a couple of ways to access other Jamboards or to start a new Jamboard. So first off, let me just open up a new tab. You can go to jamboard.google.com, okay? And that will open up your jams. You'll notice that the one that we just sent you is right there up front for me. But I have a lot of different Jamboards. So all your different Jamboards will be right there. You can also go into your Google Drive if you go to your apps menu, and you can do this really from any Google app. Just click on that apps menu and go to Jamboard. You got to scroll down a little bit, but there's Jamboard, or you can go to Google Drive. So if I were to go into my Google Drive, I'll find this one in recent. It'll probably show up in my drive as well. Nope, it's not going to show up there, but in my recents, it's probably going to show up. So here we have creating thematic units Jamboard. So that's going to show up there as well. So you can access Jamboard from a variety of places. Did I miss anything, Nadia?
I think you got it, but I just saw another Jamboard I shared with you that has nothing to do with teaching. So I thought that was kind of funny in your big, yeah.
In my, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of Jamboards.
Right, like looking at the class schedule or the training sequence when we were developing the volunteer training, right? That's funny.
Yeah, all these. So obviously I use Jamboard quite a bit for brainstorming and idea sharing, a lot. So there you go. So hopefully you guys were all able to access it. If you're having issues accessing the Jamboard, please feel free to unmute or put it in the chat. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started with this. Do a little bit of practice. Please keep in mind that there will be a workshop in 2 weeks where we'll go into like we'll have an hour to practice this. So this is kind of just a short practice time, but I will stop talking and hand it back over to Nadia so that she can lead you in this.
All right, so in the middle, which that's weird because it shows theme on mine, but it's disappeared on your screen. That green rounded square in now it's gone. In the middle is where you'd put your theme. So what is a theme that you would want that could possibly be something of interest to your students? Maybe it's something that you want to, or you want your students to learn more about, or what they want to learn more about. Maybe they talk to you about it, right? So sorry, I'm having a little trouble here. Okay. I'm just going to add that theme. So leading this activity is really just working together to figure out just starting point. So if we're creating kind of a thematic unit, so a unit which has multiple lessons to do with one theme. What's a theme that could work with your students? What do you guys think?
Budgeting.
But okay, budgeting. So is there something a little more broader about budgeting? Perhaps, is there another term? Perhaps like personal finance? So we could, I'm gonna add a, Jamie, do you want me to talk and then add stuff? Is that how you want to do this?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So, so budgeting, that's a big one. So Jamie, can you put as budgeting / personal finance as a theme?
See, that's really odd. When I play with it a while ago, when you provide the link and I click on the theme, it disappeared. It did not give me a box that looks like this for me to type. Do you go over how do you get it?
Yes. So we have to, when we're using Jamboard, we have to first choose on what we want to type in. So what Jamie did, if we look to the left of the screen, there's some options. There is one that looks like a little sticky note, which would make like a virtual sticky note, and there's a text box.
Okay.
So Jamie selected the text box, and she clicked on, first she clicked text box, then she clicked on where she wants to type something in. So
Okay.
if you just click on the boxes, all that's going to do is move the boxes around, unless you have your sticky note or your text box, which I would actually recommend using sticky notes because they're a little easier to manipulate. Jamie, could you use sticky notes? Okay.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have
sticky notes for all the rest of the boxes. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so we're budgeting personal finance. So that's what we want to cover, right? Let's say we're making this like a long-term plan. Let's start with the easiest, with math. What could be a math activity that fits into this theme of budgeting and personal finance?
You will have $10 in your account right now. We don't want anything, we don't want any negative. So how will we start?
Okay, so
maybe we
problem
do
solving.
A lesson planning on banking, or something like that, like working with money in a bank account.
Okay, yeah, that can be our activity, right? Giving them a starting amount.
Mm-hmm.
Working with money in a bank account, and then from there we can move. So let's move from left to right. So what kind of digital literacy activity could fit into a personal finance or budgeting theme?
Online banking.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. So online banking, or maybe an app, right? Like,
Right. Since we're talking, and I just realized my students, I don't know about you guys, but some of my students, they don't realize or understand how important it is to budget or manage your personal finance, and also with credit scores. It just really surprised me that I discovered that some of my AE students are not aware of that, or how important it is to credit scores or the rating of your credit scores. And that's related to math as well, like problem solving and working money. I just really, it just really, I didn't, it was a surprise for me.
yeah. In different instances, yeah, I've had students who just didn't really know about concepts. I think a lot of it really has to do with what you're exposed to, and who's raising you, really, and teaching you these things. Anecdotally, there's a lot of stuff my parents did not teach me that I had to kind of figure out my own. And sometimes you have the space to do that, to figure it out. You have that time, you have that energy, and you have those resources. And sometimes you just don't. Sometimes you're raising or taking care of family, or just, working 12 hours a day to survive, or sometimes it just doesn't occur to you, right? There's just so many variables with our students that talking to them is where we can get a great starting point in this. And so, Dr. Trey, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's an excellent start to a thematic unit, is talking to your students and seeing where's the gap? What do they know? Where's the what do they want to know? What's the gap? How can we get there? So digital literacy will be online app banking. Sure, why not?
And you know, even though we said we were going to go right to left, I think that it's really great that you brought up the whole thing about credit scores, because what that made me think of, and this is one reason why I love using Jamboard, is you can look at everything all at once. It made me think about social studies and just the history of the credit system and how the credit system has evolved, how credit is scored, and how you can improve your credit score. Because to me, that's history, that's current events, that's social sociology, if you will, like the way that we interact with each other. It actually, our credit scores and and the way that we look for loans and try to get financing for things, that's all a very social thing. And so that made me think of social studies. And so as I'm thinking about these things, and keep in mind that because we're using sticky notes, you can put more than one sticky note in each box. So I can add that to the social studies, and we can even add more as we go along.
Right. It can also be under the language arts or writing as well, Jamie and Nadia, because when you mentioned that when you go to a bank or a loan officers, sometimes they use a language we don't even understand. You know, they don't use the common language that we normally use. So that can be under the language art as well, like the language or the context, how it was presented, and also how it was written. And of course, you know, some of them are teeny tiny little font lines. We can't even see them without a magnifying glass. So that can be under those as well too. And I like how you brought it up with the social studies, like the histories, the context, how it would deal, how we involve with that, with credit score. I really do like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, this is some good stuff. Definitely language is important. I think history gives us a grounding or an understanding of why things are the way today. There could even be an activity reading about predatory loans and predatory credit system history, because that has happened. This can go beyond just sort of personal banking, and we can talk about maybe the history of redlining in America and why certain neighborhoods are the way they are, right? Like this can go offshoot into many pieces here. Jamie, if you could make the sticky notes just a little bit bigger, just so that we could see the text on the screen. So as you guys may have noticed, Jamie is changing the colors on the sticky notes. And that's also a great way to be more visually appealing. It could also be a good way of color coding. So this is another benefit of using Jamboard, right? Is that it's easier to point stuff out. And with the sticky note, what I really like about sticky notes is you can move them around. If throughout your process you realize that maybe something doesn't fit somewhere, you could just grab it and drag it somewhere else. And it's just so simple. So with language arts, reading and interpreting credit scores, loan documents, absolutely. One thing I was just thinking about as we spoke is in digital literacy, media literacy, is what articles online can help you better understand these concepts, but what are also predatory? What are ones that give false information? What are ones that ask for personal details that could affect your online safety? How do you know the site that you're using is the bank website and not a fake website made to look like that? Right? Because our students, generally the population, English language learners and people who don't have a high school equivalency who dropped out of school, they are almost always targets for these kinds of schemes of getting text messages, of getting emails about something wrong with their bank account or or claim your money, and it just steals their information, right? So I Identifying threats is another tool here that can fit into personal finance. How to protect yourself. So we have a lot for almost everything. We're still a little short on writing and science. I was wondering if anyone, Dr. Tran, you're giving us some great stuff. And I love hearing from you, but I'm also curious if anyone else in the webinar has any suggestions here. Anything that could be added to a subject that's already covered or something new. All right, that's totally fine. Okay, we'll keep going. So let's think about, sorry?
For me, like with the writing, one of the obvious is an essay, right? So what kind of essay topic could be given that falls in line with personal finance and financial literacy and budgeting?
Well, it will be your business or your vision statements, what your business entail, how will operate that. So if you were to go to a bank or a loan officers, you will present your business statement or your operation statement. So that way they want to review that. And is there any collateral that you might put down? And for some of us, we might not know what collateral would be or what would that entail. So for the science aspect of that, that can cause them to be a little bit cognitively impaired or challenged. Because if you don't have good credit score or back to credit history, you don't have any assets, you don't have any collateral. How can you have something to put it down to borrow money?
Sure, absolutely. Jamie, can you add that?
So okay, I need a little bit of help there because I'm assuming that this is going to end up with science.
Yes.
So help me out here. How should I word that? Because to me, just talking about collateral doesn't necessarily touch on science concepts, and maybe I'm missing something. So I want to make sure I get that right.
I would say based on your business, the nature of your business. Let's just say if you want to open Susie Q cupcakes,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to know the science part of that and also the math, like how much sugar do you need, how much flour do you need, and how much money do you need to borrow to have that going, to talk to a banker so that way they would loan you the money. And the science part of that is how it would apply to. Okay, I'm going to shut up. I'm rambling. Nadia, we need you now. Or Nancy or Gloria, we need you now. I'm going to shut up now.
Well, I think what you're talking about are variables, right?
Right.
So you're talking about variables. You're talking about inputting into formulas, which is more of a math thing, but formulas are used in science. See, that one, it could be a tricky. It's not always, I gotta say, it's not always perfect, right? This kind of form, but it's definitely something. It could be analyzing formula. It could be using formulas. It could be what's the term? Like
The
reading
interest rate, right?
Okay,
The interest
yeah.
rate that you need to know, like how much you let's just say you borrow $5,000 with the interest rate at 25% and you're paying that for a year. How much would that gonna be? So that will be under the science as well, just like with a formula, because with money they all talk about interest rate.
So to me,
Yes.
that's math. Just kind of putting it out there, like calculating interest, principal, interest, and then total amount, paid back. All of that, to me, that is, like using simple interest formulas in math.
Right.
So that's why I, put that in the math
All right,
section.
thank you. And also, where do you go? I mean, do you go to a major loaners like Wells Fargo's, or do you go to one of those blood-sucking drive, high interest rate to borrow the loans? Could that be under the science?
And to me, that's language arts. Doing research on different lenders.
Right,
That might even be digital literacy, even just researching different lenders and being able to compare and contrast different
right.
lenders. So researching
Like
and
the well-established lenders versus the vampire blood-sucking high interest rate.
Hmm.
a lot of metaphors there.
I mean, it's treated more as a social science, right? Or more sort of, I was thinking of economics, learning about economics. That,
Uh-huh.
I mean, even though there are some scientific principle in that, it's more so social studies. But that's another thing that is kind of a part of history and current events, is understanding sort of economics, basic economics. Let's see. I mean, this is getting pretty full.
Yeah.
It's looking good.
And like I said, we weren't going to go into a whole lot of detail this time about, really making sure that everything is covered and then taking it from there. That's going to be in 2 weeks when we do the workshop, when we do
Right.
more
The main
practice.
goal here is to just get the kind of brainstorming down.
Mhm.
And of course, this isn't quite lesson planning yet. This is just idea creation, right?
Mhm.
When you sit down and you're lesson planning, you're going to choose one of these, create your learning objective, create your activities and your time frame. So this is a good way just to get that out and then thinking about, okay, if it's tied to a theme, if it's tied to a learning objective. So I think that's like really the benefit here, is just figuring out how to use this tool a little differently than specifically for work with students.
So I think we're going to actually take a pause here. And of course, you have this link to the Jamboard. And so you have access to this forever and always. You have access to it. And so you can refer back to it. But like I said, in a couple of weeks, we're going to come back. We're going to do a workshop on it, and we can do more thorough practice and start maybe even getting into the lesson planning part of it. So I'm going to actually go back to, just in the interest of time, I'm going to go back to our slideshow. And I do want to open it up to any final questions you have. But of course, also, thank you all for attending. And we hope that you got some, useful information out of this. And we hope to see you in 2 weeks for the workshop as well. Were there any last questions?
Thank you so much for everything. And I didn't mean to talk the most today. I'm sorry, guys.
No, I think that was good. I think that everybody needed you to. That was exactly what was needed.
Driving discussion. So I'd also add that please join us in 2 weeks so we can do this practice. And if you do, take a look at the saved webinar on our YouTube channel, our workshop on how to use Google Jamboard, just a little refresher. We will guide you. We will work with you on using the tools, but it doesn't hurt to just see how you can use the tool for your benefit.
Thank you for training us today. I will definitely gonna take this back, what I learned, and I will implement that with my staff, also instructors. And I like how you say, Nadia, just create a safe working environments and working with our people rather than just assign them. They will be more comfortable when we work together. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Tran. Yeah, it's such a benefit for everyone to see when we're struggling together and not struggling alone.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful afternoon and weekend, and we'll see you back hopefully in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.